stop overthinking. We just pray and trust. A blessing life. When your mind refuses to stay quiet, it does not mean something is wrong with you. It means something inside you is asking for relief, for stillness, for trust that you have forgotten how to give. There is a moment in life when thinking becomes heavier than living. You replay conversations, predict outcomes, search for answers that never arrive. And slowly, without noticing, your mind stops being a tool and becomes a cage. You are awake, but not at peace. You are moving, but not free. Right now, this message is not here to give you more answers. It is here to interrupt the noise that has been speaking louder than your own heart. Because not every problem is solved by thinking harder. Some situations are only healed when you stop trying to control them. Something deeper is happening beneath your thoughts. A quiet invitation to step out of mental chaos and return to trust. Not blind trust, but a conscious surrender, where you finally stop fighting what you cannot hold in your hands anymore. And in this exact moment, something within you already knows this is true. You may not have noticed when it started, but slowly your thoughts began to turn inward, looping over the same fears, the same questions, the same imagined futures. What once felt like simple reflection has now become a maze with no exit. You try to find clarity inside the very thing that creates confusion. The more you search, the more paths appear, and none of them feel certain. It is like walking in circles inside a place that was built by your own fear of making mistakes. And here is what most people never realize. The labyrinth is not real. It is constructed from repetition, doubt, and the need to predict everything before it happens. But life was never meant to be fully predicted. It was meant to be experienced. But safety does not come from thinking. It comes from presence, from stepping out of the maze long enough to breathe without trying to control the next turn. And the moment you begin to see the labyrinth for what it is, something inside you starts to loosen its grip. There is a point where overthinking is no longer just a habit of the mind. It becomes a silent burden on the soul. You still function, you still speak, you still appear fine on the outside, but inside there is a constant weight that never fully leaves you. It does not always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as exhaustion that rest cannot fix. Sometimes it appears as a strange inability to feel fully present, as if part of you is always somewhere else, stuck in unfinished thoughts. This is not random. It is a sign that your inner world is carrying more than it was meant to hold. Thoughts that were never processed, fears that were never released, expectations that were never questioned. They accumulate quietly until even silence feels loud. And the most dangerous part is that you begin to normalize it. You start believing that this constant mental noise is just who you are. But it is not your identity. It is overload, because not everything you are carrying requires understanding. Some things only require surrender, and the moment you begin to recognize this overload for what it is, a shift begins. Not in your circumstances, but in your awareness of them. Something inside you starts to question whether you were meant to live in this constant state of mental tension, or whether there is another way, quieter, lighter, more aligned with peace than control. There is a subtle moment most people never notice. When thinking stops being helpful and starts becoming invasive, it does not announce itself. It slowly replaces your peace with analysis, your presence with anticipation, your trust with constant mental rehearsal of what might go wrong. At first, it feels responsible. You believe you are preparing yourself, staying alert, avoiding mistakes. But over time, that same preparation turns into exhaustion. Your mind never fully rests, even when your body is still, and then something shifts quietly. You start living more in imagined scenarios than in real moments. You are no longer experiencing life as it happens. You are reacting to life before it even arrives. And in that space, peace becomes harder to access. This is the moment where overthinking begins to take something sacred from you. Not your intelligence, not your awareness, but your ability to simply be here without resistance. And what makes it even more complex is that the mind convinces you this is protection. It tells you that if you think enough, you will finally feel safe. But safety created by thought is never stable. It changes with every new worry. Real peace is not built in the mind. It is remembered in stillness, in the rare moments when you are not trying to solve life, but allowing it to unfold without constant interference. And somewhere inside you, there is a part that remembers what that feels like. Not as an idea, but as a state of being that existed before the noise became louder than your presence. That part is still there. It has not disappeared. It is simply waiting for you to stop feeding the need to control every outcome long enough to hear it again. And when that happens, even briefly, you begin to realize that peace was never gone. It was only buried under too many thoughts. Life rarely takes away your path. More often, it overwhelms your perception of it. Thoughts overlap thoughts, fears attach themselves to possibilities, and suddenly, even simple decisions feel heavy. Not because you lack clarity, but because clarity is being drowned out. This is how overthinking creates the illusion of confusion. It does not remove truth from your life. It only makes it harder to recognize, and in that space, you start searching harder. More analysis, more questioning, more mental effort. But noise does not become clarity through volume. It becomes louder noise. There is a different way to find your direction again. It is not found by thinking more, but by creating space for silence to return. Because silence has a way of revealing what noise hides. And when the inner noise begins to settle, even slightly, something surprising happens. You realize that many of the answers you were searching for were never missing. They were simply inaccessible beneath layers of mental interference. This is not about forcing your mind to stop. It is about understanding that you do not need to chase every thought that appears. Some thoughts are not guidance. They are just passing movement. And the more you stop identifying with every mental wave, the more you begin to sense something steadier beneath it all. A quieter awareness that has been there the entire time, waiting for you to notice it again. And in that recognition, the idea of being lost starts to dissolve, because control in its mental form is never complete. The more you try to hold everything together in your mind, the more you realize how many things are outside of your reach. And instead of releasing that tension, you tighten your grip even more. This is where overthinking finds its deepest fuel. It convinces you that letting go means danger, that not analyzing everything means you are unprepared. So you stay mentally active even when nothing is happening, as if stillness itself is a threat. But here is what begins to change everything. Most of what you are trying to control has never been fully controllable. Life does not respond to mental pressure. It responds to alignment, timing, and presence. The exhaustion you feel is not because life is too complex. It is because the mind is trying to carry what was never meant to be carried alone. You were not designed to mentally manage every possible version of the future, and slowly, when you become honest with yourself, you start to notice something important. The moments you felt most at peace were never the moments you had full control. They were the moments you allowed life to be what it is, without constant resistance. Letting go is not losing power. It is releasing a burden that was never meant to define your strength. And in that release, something subtle begins to return. A sense that you do not need to solve everything in advance to be okay in the present moment. That realization does not remove uncertainty from life, but it removes the suffering that comes from trying to eliminate uncertainty through thought. At first, it feels like awareness. You analyze, you reflect, you try to understand every angle. But over time, something shifts. The mind becomes louder than intuition, and you begin to mistake mental urgency for spiritual direction. True inner guidance is quiet. It does not rush you. It does not create panic. It does not demand immediate answers. It simply feels steady, even when the situation is uncertain. Overthinking, on the other hand, always carries tension. It pushes, it repeats, it accelerates without arriving anywhere meaningful. And yet, because it is active, it feels like you are doing something important. This is where many people become disconnected from their own clarity. Not because they lost it, but because they stopped recognizing its voice. The deeper truth is that you already possess an internal compass. But it becomes harder to hear when the mind is constantly interpreting everything through fear or anticipation. And so life begins to feel more complicated than it really is. Not because the path is unclear, but because the signal is being distorted by noise. There is a return point, a place where you can begin to separate thought from truth again. It starts when you stop reacting to every mental movement as if it requires immediate action. And in that space of restraint, something subtle begins to reappear. A sense of knowing that does not need explanation. A direction that does not arrive through pressure, but through stillness. And the more you recognize this difference, the less power overthinking has over your decisions. But what if nothing is going wrong at all? What if me,